One of the cool things about being back for We Are Weekend is interacting with folks from different classes, from different walks of life, from different generations. And it's just awesome to hear their stories as far as their experiences when they were here on campus. I had a chance to actually go and tour Beaver Stadium. I had a chance to go to WPSU and see how they go about their daily activities to get folks involved in their operations.
Penn State is really a pivotal place for both my wife and I. We met here. I feel like I grew up at Penn State. It just broadened my horizons, both academically and also as a person. And being involved with different activities on campus really molded me into the person that I am today. We have 5 kids. So for us, trying to get away and do something just the two of us is really tough. So it's really great that we can have our kids with us and participate. They've had a great time participating in the different tours and activities, enjoying some of the food, and having them here as part of our family has really been able to allow us to enjoy the weekend, not just my wife and I, but our entire family together.
Being a pioneer is really special because it was like getting an award, and the award was just for being 50 years a graduate. But actually tonight I get to put the medals on some of the new pioneers, and it's passing the torch. And that's very special. And We Are Weekend allows me to do that for them, and hopefully they'll get enough out of We Are Weekend that they'll come back and do the same thing in the future years.
We thought it'd be really cool to bring alumni tour guides back to give tours with current students and really get that alumni and also current student perspective to be able to share all of our stories. And for us on the tours, it's been really fun because we're also hearing stories from other Penn State alumni. Even if they weren't tour guides, they have their own sort of understanding of campus and little stories from different areas. So for me, it's been just so great, that synergy of sort of stories and everyone sort of having their love for Penn State and being able to share that. For me, coming back to Penn State is so much about reliving old traditions, but also creating new ones. And I really thought coming back for We Are Weekend would be a great opportunity to start a new tradition at Penn State.
We are! Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to our Penn State Varsity S and our Football Letterman catch-up session. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. It could be morning, it could be afternoon, it could be tomorrow, depending on where you're checking in with us online. We can't get together in person, but as any good Penn Stater knows, we're always connected. With me today is, in no particular order, although we'll go by grad year, I think, is Mr. Shelly Hammonds, who was a member of our Penn State football team in the early 90s, Mr. Kyle Brady, also a member of our football team in the early 90s, and Wally Richardson, who was a member of our football team from the early 90s as well. My name is Kirk Deal. I happen to be part of the program with these fine gentlemen in the early 90s. As you can tell by my structure, I was not a Division I football player, but I happened to take care of these gentlemen as a football student manager. And I made a career for myself here at Penn State, never leaving, becoming a member of a Coach Joe Paterno's staff and later Coach Bill O'Brien's staff. And I'm currently the director of our Varsity S program here at Penn State under the Nittany Lion Club. It's my job to keep our alumni athletes connected to the university. And as we all know about this weekend, there's nothing more powerful than that. We're going to divide our talk up into 4 different quarters, keeping with our football metric. I'm going to ask each of the panelists a question basically about their progress, their journey to where it is today. And then quarter number 4 will be to answer any questions that were submitted by you as earlier in the registration process. And of course, if anything pops up during the presentation, feel free to use the chat box or the question and answer session. So without further ado, I'll start with the first question, and Shelly will tee you up first. Kind of tell us about your love for the game when you decided that football was going to be a part of your life before Penn State. So if you could go back to your career there and get us started, and we'll go with you first, Shelly.
Yeah, I would say at a very young age, I knew that football was going to be a part of my life. I started off as a baseball player, actually. So my mom, who was super hesitant about allowing me to play football, basically debated about it for years until I actually had my baseball coach come and talk to her in reference to me playing football. And I probably was 8 or 9 years old at that time. Was the first time I ever got a chance to play football, and it just took off from there. I played both sports throughout my career up through high school, but football was always my first love. It was what I watched pretty much every Saturday. Any college football game that I could set my eyes on, I would watch. And my love for the game just grew from there. And also knowing that I think sometimes, without being conceited or arrogant about things, you kind of realize that you're a little different as an athlete. And I think I realized at a young age that I was a little different, whether it was on the baseball field, basketball, or football, that I was a little different. I was a little better than most of the kids around me. And I had coaches that developed that saw that in me and developed that. And so it just grew from there. And I grew up watching, I lived in SEC country. So I grew up watching the SEC game of the week. Loved all the great running backs, all the great defensive backs, wide receivers. So just that passion just grew from that point for me. And I knew by the time that even before I hit high school, when I was in middle school, that I wanted to play football at a minimum at the college level, because I love the college game. And if it happened to, as far as the pro thing was concerned, if that happened, it was nice. But I wanted to play college football because I felt like I was talented enough to do it. I had a lot of success in high school and growing up, and all the way up through high school. Won 2 state championships in football, 1 in baseball. So I always had a lot of success in the sports realm. And then the other thing was that I knew, growing up in a single parent household, I saw all the things that my mom sacrificed for me to be able to do the things that I wanted to do and play sports. She never missed a game, literally never missed a baseball game, football game. If she did, it might have been 1 or 2, but I can't recall any games of her ever missing. And so it was also me rewarding her for all the sacrifices as a single parent that she gave up in order for me to live my lifetime dream and to be successful. So that's kind of how football, worked out for me, is that I knew at a very young age that I wanted to do it. And then it was a reward on top of that, of my mom having not to pay for my education and having football pay for my education.
Sorry about that. Following up with our other alums, just tell us where you grew up in SEC country.
I grew up in South Carolina, small town called Barnwell. It's actually not very far from the University of South Carolina, so about an hour away. So I was heavily recruited by the University of South Carolina, was also heavily recruited by Clemson, and then some other teams outside of the state. But obviously, Penn State, I think recently, prior to me even coming here, they'd won a national championship, I think the '86 team. And I actually had an opportunity to watch that game. Fell in love with the way the school played, the team played as a whole, and the fact that it wasn't an individualized thing, that it was all about the team concept. So when I got recruited by Penn State, my initial plan was like, I'm just going to come up there and take a visit, but I know I'm probably not going to go there because I'll be honest with you, my heart was kind of set on going to Clemson. But when I got there and I had an opportunity to meet with the coach's staff, Ivory Gathers was my host at the time, who was also a South Carolina native, played at Johns Island. We actually had played Ivory the year before for the state championship, in which we beat them. But me and Ivory continued to remain friends through that. So he hosted me for my visit, and I fell in love with the atmosphere, the team atmosphere. And even though I'd never been that far away from home, I think that was actually my first time ever on an airplane, was coming up to Penn State. So that once I got back, and I remember, landing and, that weekend and later on during that week, I pretty much told my mom, hey, I think I'm going to Penn State. So it was engraved in my heart after that was the place that I was supposed to be. And you can feel it. I'd been to several other schools. Again, had visited South Carolina Clipsons on several occasions, but it just felt different. And I think as a recruit and as a player, once you have that feeling in you, a place that feels like home, even though it was far, far away from me, I knew that was the place that I was supposed to be.
That's great. We'll get to the journey while you're at Penn State in quarter number 2. So Kyle, just repeat the same question for you. When you fell in love with the game of football and you realized, kind of up until your Penn State career.
Yeah, actually, similar to Shelly, it was, I grew up in more of a baseball household. My dad actually had a bit of time as a professional baseball player at the minor league level. He was a big, tall, lanky, right-handed fireballer. Apparently he could throw pretty hard. They didn't have radar guns back at that time, but his buddies swear he must have thrown in the mid to high 90s. And I think he would really liked if one of his 2 sons, I'm one of 4, and there's 2 boys and 2 girls, would have ended up in baseball. And I was born in Northern Virginia near DC. We moved up to Pennsylvania, though, Southern Pennsylvania, Harrisburg area, when I was just in elementary school. And yeah, baseball and basketball were really my thing growing up. I was tall and lanky, built like he was, hadn't been in the weight room at all, and really wasn't built like a football player. I mean, didn't start playing Pop Warner until I was 12 years old in 7th grade. And with relative success, I mean, had athleticism and size, but really did not. Oh, sorry. Wait, I'm sorry. My daughter just walked in. Hey guys, I'm on a call. If I can just have a minute here. Hey, there's my daughter, Brooke. I'm in her room. It's one of the quietest places in the house until she comes in anyway. That's a little, impromptu stuff there. So anyway, 7th grade and 8th grade had decent success in football, nothing ridiculous. But so 9th grade, I ended up breaking my hand. I played on the freshman team and broke my hand, missed the whole season. I really wasn't thinking I had any future in football at all. And then, but I kept growing. And then by the time I was a sophomore, I was 6'5", 210 pounds, had never touched a weight. I was just going to play basketball and baseball. And turns out my high school football coach, and I've told this story many times back in the Harrisburg area, he was a tremendous role model. By the time I was in high school, my parents were not together anymore. So I was likewise being raised in a single family home. And so I really needed a strong male role model in my life. And my high school coach came along just the right time. His name was Coach Bob Craig. He was at the high school since 1959. The only wrestling coach they'd ever had. Took over the football program in the early 60s. I came along in the late 80s. And he just kind of grabbed me by the scruff of the neck, so to speak. He said, Kyle, you're going to play football at least for one more year and see how it goes. And I think you're going to like it, And it turns out he was right. In my sophomore year, I only played JV. I didn't even play varsity yet. We had a really good, strong program. And, that was state ranked and everything like that, and winning district championships. And that was before the era of state championships in Pennsylvania that year anyway. And but I did well in that JV season, scored a few touchdowns, had a lot more fun with it. But still, I was a tall, lanky kid. By my sophomore year, though, I was just continued to grow, and develop. And so I finally started getting in the weight room. And by my junior year, we had a great season. And I had kind of a breakout year at the varsity level, caught over 900 and some yards and passes, and I only on 40 catches and a bunch of touchdowns. And it suddenly became very evident to me that maybe Coach Craig was right, that he saw some ability in me and the size and the strength and the body that I could put weight on. So I started, listening to him a little bit more, figuring, hey, maybe this guy knows what he's talking about, got in the weight room, that kind of thing. And suddenly the letters started coming in from all different teams, and in the 80s, a lot of alumni on this call may remember Penn State was actually one of the best programs in the country. They went to 3 national championships, won it in 82, went in 85 and lost to Oklahoma. 86, they beat the Miami Hurricanes. So, and they were doing it with such, in a classy way. They were doing it with the team concept, no names on the back of the jerseys, black cleats. It's all about the team, and then graduation rate 90% plus. So they're doing it in a lot of ways that, when you went and visited there, and my mom went up with me, it was actually my birthday weekend. I'll never forget. I wish I had a phone now. Joe Paterno sang happy birthday with a cake to me on the Sunday of my recruiting visit. That was obviously very flattering, but it's the last time I was treated that way by him for quite some time. But it turns out, like Shelly, I had a similar experience of feeling like, hey, this is a special place where they're doing something really unique, and it's as big time a program as anywhere. And it seemed to me that they kind of had a need at the tight end position as well at that time, that it might be a good opportunity to step into. So that was kind of my journey. I was a bit of a late bloomer, certainly a late bloomer as far as football is concerned. Didn't even start as a varsity player to my junior year, but kind of those 2 years, my junior, senior year, were good years, and we were always in good teams, and just down the road, obviously from Penn State. And I really kept an open mind though about going other places. Went to University of Miami, who was just as dominant in the 80s. Went to 4 national championships, won 3. Went to Michigan, a couple other places, but at the end of the day, it just seemed like Penn State made the most sense for so many reasons. My family being able to see me play. You played on a big time, big time stage. Had the opportunity to go to national championships. One thing, Shelly might remember this, and Wally as well. Joe Paterno, as long as he'd been the head coach there since 1965, he said he had never recruited a player that didn't either play for an undefeated team or for a national championship during his time there. And I thought, wow, all that time here, and at that time it was 20 some years, to have never recruited a player that didn't have that opportunity was really quite a statement. Not even Bo Schembechler, who was at at Michigan still at that time, and some of the other coaches out there couldn't say that kind of thing. For one thing, most of them didn't have that amount of time at the helm. But to be able to have that type of success on a continual level, on staying at that kind of level continually and for such a long period of time, was really impressive.
Yeah, I remember Coach used to always talk about being the 4-year plan, right? I'm going to get you here, and every 4 years you're going to have an opportunity to play for a national championship. So, all right, Wally, it's your turn. Your journey from when the game became the pathway for you to come to Penn State.
Well, my journey starts off similar to both Shelly and Kyle. I always liked football. I was a big Dallas Cowboys fan growing up. My favorite player was Tony Dorsett. As you all are aware, he was a running back. That wasn't my strong suit. I wasn't fleet of foot like he was, but from a young age, I really, I wouldn't say I was groomed to be a quarterback, but in my school district, the high school football team used to go around and do these 5th grade football clinics when I was growing up. And, I was very fortunate that all of the football coaches for our high school program played football, whether it was at a Division I school or a Furman or a Presbyterian. So they all had collegiate football experience and knew how to develop players. And I played at one of the largest schools in the state of South Carolina. So, one thing they did was make sure that everybody played their best position because we had great participation from the guys at the school. And I remember my 6th grade English teacher, her husband was the football coach at my middle school. And I sat in her English class, and we used to have intramural football at recess when I was in middle school. So each homeroom had a football team, and I was the quarterback for my homeroom. And I guess she had an eye for talent. She basically told her husband, I'll find you a quarterback for next year. So that's kind of where it really started for me. And I never looked back. I played basketball growing up, also really loved that game. But as far as playing football, I think I had a unique talent to be able to throw the football like I did. And that's what helped me get my scholarship to Penn State. And, I kind of knew it was real when, after my 9th grade year, I started getting a few letters from some schools, and one of the first 3 schools to contact me was Penn State. And like Shelly said, I didn't think I was going to be going. I knew I wanted to go to school. Obviously, I didn't realize it was going to be that far. If I had my druthers at the time as an 18-year-old kid, I would have went to school in Florida. But things worked out where I came up here on an official visit with my dad, and we flew into University Park Airport, and it was Super Bowl weekend. Shelly was my host, so I got a chance to know him and the rest of the crew that he lived with, and we had a really good time. The stadium was impressive, looked like Battlestar Galactica to me, so it was just a really neat experience to be able to visit Penn State and kind of figure out where I'd spend the next 5 years of my life.
Yeah, that's great. And for everybody on the call, the rest of the alums, I think it's important to realize One of the most powerful things that I've heard in my almost being here almost 30 years, 4 as a student, the rest on staff, it's the power of high school coaches. And it doesn't matter the sport. That's kind of where the chisel comes right. I mean, you look at these 3 men in front of you, and they all brought up the mentorship with with the high school coach. And I think that's important for those of you that on the call or on the Zoom that have young people, that sports is a gateway. It's a really good gateway. So on to quarter number 2, and we'll kick off with Kyle. This is your journey while at Penn State, and what I ask you to focus on, if you could, it's not all what do we call it, bells and whistles, right? So if you could talk a little bit about the relationships you've built while at Penn State, your struggles, your successes, pitfalls, and what the university did to set you up off the field. If you could touch a little bit about that, Kyle.
Sure, Kirk. Yeah, I mean, I would say that the first few years, especially of my time at Penn State, would be characterized by hills and valleys. I mean, my freshman year, I was a pretty highly recruited guy coming out of my high school. Made some All-American teams. Was one of the guys that I kind of had the impression they might be relying on me to try to contribute early. So in preseason, I was having a decent preseason my freshman year. I ended up turning my ankle pretty badly, got a high ankle sprain, which can really stick with you for a long time. And Joe, he didn't redshirt me. So I was starting to travel with the team, went out to USC and, a couple other away games that we had that year in 1990. And but then when I finally started getting healthy again, maybe in early October, I sort of seeing the handwriting on the wall that I was maybe going to get in some two tight end sets and goal line and that type of thing. And I was going to use up one of my years of eligibility doing that. So even though as much as I want, the thought of playing as a freshman was an honor and that would be a great thing to get on the field and exciting, I thought, well, do I want to use a whole year of eligibility for that? So I asked him to redshirt. So I did that, and it was probably the best decision I ever made as far as my collegiate career. Even though it's kind of depressing and sad, to not be out there in the field and having the chance to compete, but still having to work so hard in practice and in the weight room, everything else, gives you a chance to physically develop, to focus on your academics, which I really needed. I was not a serious student coming out of high school, and I needed all the opportunity I could get and the work I could get to develop better study habits, which in Joe's program was so structured, and you had study hall and everything. All those things were so new to me, and it felt almost restrictive. It was so structured, but in hindsight, it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. And in my sophomore year, my redshirt freshman year, really kind of had a little bit of a breakout season. Ended up Al Golden, who was one of our team captains and a good player, and now has gone on to coaching success. He was injured for a while, and I ended up getting into some games and having some decent performances. Caught about 5 touchdowns that year, and people were even saying things like, well, Brady might only stick around for one more year and then declare for the NFL. And had it continue to go down that trajectory, that might have been a possibility. But, I was still only 19 years old and still had so much physical maturing to do. But then that next year, it kind of went back down into a valley a bit. And 92, the team struggled and I struggled. I couldn't stay healthy, had a number of different nagging injuries. But I think that was a year that really, for me, was one that I really had to look internally and say, hey, what am I going to, I wasn't consistent on the practice field. I wasn't consistent in the weight room. I wasn't really pouring myself out and giving a full sacrifice, a full commitment to being the best possible player I could be, best athlete, best student. And it kind of was, I actually left. I walked out of practice one day because I was so frustrated with how things were going. Joe demoted me. I was in a blue jersey, made it green, the big psychological game of jersey colors and what string you were. And I had gotten a blue jersey my redshirt freshman year, and my thought was I'd never relinquish it. I'd never give it up. But he saw how much I was struggling. He thought it would be good for me to eat a little humble pie, and he was right. But my pride, I couldn't take it, So I walked away for a while, and he understood, and he understood probably what was going on in my head, that I needed some time to really dial up my commitment, and it was kind of a challenge to do that, and that's exactly what I did. And things didn't immediately get better, but people saw a change in my attitude. John Tom, Coach JT, the weight room coach, and the rest of the coaches and my academics, everything else. I said, you know what, I would be a fool, and I'd have to be able to look back one day in the mirror and say, what if I'd really given myself fully? And those last 2 years, thankfully, went very well. First of all, for us as a team, the first year in the Big Ten, we went 9-2, had we won one of the 2 games between Michigan and Ohio State, we win the Big Ten and go to the Rose Bowl. But we were really building something special though that year with the class that came in behind us with Jana and Bobby and all the other guys that were in that outstanding class. We were really building some momentum and some unity as a team. And then we went on to such a special season in '94 where we were explosive as an offense and managed to really take the conference by storm in only our second year. And that was what really, and had I not redshirted back in that freshman year, I wouldn't even have been around for that season. And I wouldn't have been a first round pick. I mean, maybe after that 4th year, if I just used up all my eligibility, the Browns said they might've taken me in the 2nd round, but it ended up being for the best that I ended up redshirting. And I wouldn't have ever seen that back at that time. But, and then the relationships, and the camaraderie you develop. I mean, people ask me even today, because I ended up being fortunate and blessed enough to play for 13 years in the NFL. They say, what do you miss the most? And I say, well, definitely the camaraderie and the competition, of course. But there's nothing like the camaraderie of the locker room. We had a special camaraderie at Penn State, a commitment to each other and the sacrifices you make with each other. It develops a deep bond and one that you never forget, and it never goes away. Even when we get together these days up there at State College, you still feel that sense of unity with guys that you've done so many things with and really poured yourself out in so much effort and sweat and blood and tears and emotion with.
Yeah, that's fantastic story. I wanted to give a shout out. David Wolf, it was was a Shunk Hall 1990 freshman down the hallway from you. So he's on the call.
Oh man, that's amazing. 305 Shunk Hall. That was my freshman year. I'm so glad.
Yeah, you still remember the dorm rooms, right?
I remember it. Yeah, we actually, just a little closet for a room is basically what you're living in, and but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Having the real college experience where you're not isolated on some part of campus where only the athletes are. I was so thankful on those cold winter days, though, that you could just run across to the commons and get to the dining hall, because we had to be there, as all these guys will attest, between 7 and 8:30 in the morning for breakfast. And so I was really glad it was a hop, skip, and a jump away.
Yeah, we were always told we were students first who happened to play a little bit of football. So that registers today. Wally, go ahead. A little bit about your Penn State, your journey while you were at Penn State.
Well, it had its challenges, just like everybody else, but it was a very meaningful experience. I did actually play a little bit my freshman year. I didn't have any expectations of playing as a freshman. I just really wanted to come in and do my best. And, I was getting reps during the preseason and all of that type of jazz. And the opener for our 92 season was the Cincinnati game in Cincinnati. We had just beat them 81-0 the year before I arrived here. So we played them at Niepert Stadium in Cincinnati, night game on artificial turf, and it's raining. I didn't even expect to make the trip, let alone play in the game. And that was my first game playing on artificial turf. So that was a big challenge for me. John Saka got hurt early in the game. I thought Matt Nardolillo would be going in, but I guess he was still dinged up. So Joe called me and said, "You're in there now." So that started that. We ended up winning the squeaker there. The next week we played Temple at home, and I'm named the starter early in the week. So I knew I was starting against Temple, prepared all week, knew what was going on, really excited. We go out against Temple, have a really good game. I have some modest success, which was nice. It helped that I had people like OJ McDuffie and Kyle and Richie Anderson, Brian O'Neill, and we had a really solid group of linemen, John Jarrett, Greg Huntington, Bucky Greeley. So, from that standpoint, I was in pretty good shape, but, the big letdown was the next week. John suddenly got healthy enough to start against Miami, so I didn't play. And that was really disappointing. And, when you come in early from not really expecting to play to actually starting, that's a big change. And once you get a taste of that type of opportunity, you don't want to let it go. And it just wasn't my time to be the full-time starter. So basically over the next year and a half, 2 years, I was one of the backups. I redshirted my sophomore year. So our first year in the Big Ten, I was a redshirt, didn't see any game action. And then in '94, I was the backup on the undefeated team and started my last 2 years in '95 and '96. So after getting a taste of being a starter early on, I was took a back seat for a couple of years, but then came back on the scene for my junior and senior year. And, I was really fortunate. I didn't really get hurt throughout the course of my career here. I did get banged up my senior year. That slowed me down a little bit. I had a pulled groin that I dealt with for most of the year. And then we played a game against, I think it was Rutgers or Temple in the Meadowlands. And I got a separation of my AC joint, my shoulder, but I didn't miss any game time behind that because we had an off week the next week. And as I talk through this, it's funny the things you remember that happened, how long ago it was. But, I had a good support system. People like Shelly and Lee Rubin really took me under their wing when I first got here. And also was able to make some pretty good relationships with guys in my own class, like Terry Killens, Mark Tate, Chris Campbell, those guys, Jason Collins. And we all kind of just made sure we looked out for one another and took care of one another. And we still try to do that today. So it's not always easy. Everybody's situation is a little bit different, but I think, I don't regret the lessons that I learned at the time I did, and it helped make me be able to battle adversity to this day and continue to just, it was never about me, it was about the team and what was important for the success of the team. And, I feel like we had a pretty good run when I was around here, and it was a blessing to be a part of it.
Yeah, thanks, Wally. It's important that the locker room, right? Wally touched on it a little bit, and obviously Kyle talked about it. It's the shared common goal, and the people that you play with, the people on your left and right. And I think you keep that going, and you're doing the shared experiences. So the locker room was always the best part for me, was to hear the conversations. And when I stayed on staff and my fellow friends here graduated, the stories were the same. Who was the best NBA player? Who was the best? And it was just, you would just substitute the current players with the and who was playing in the NBA or the NFL. So, but the locker room is always a great place to kind of feel protected. So, Shelly, your story at Penn State?
Yeah, I came in as a freshman and I redshirted my first year there. Probably the first thing I remember is having to take the initial tests, when we come in for camp, and failing the 1440 test, and realizing then that I probably from a complete standpoint I wasn't where I needed to be. I wind up taking the test, and during that time, if you failed the test, you had to get up the next morning and take it again, and until you passed it. So luckily for me, the next morning I got up and I passed the test, and it started from there. But for me, that first year, I redshirted. It was more of a developmental year for me, more of a getting stronger. Obviously, things are not like they are today, where the advancement as far as workout equipment and being able to be in shape and be ready for camp. So it took me a year to adjust to the speed of the game, and of course there were phenomenal athletes ahead of me during that time. I mean, thinking the defensive backfield, we had Darren Perry, we had Leonard Humphreys. Eddie Johnson was a senior that I think the one year, my redshirt freshman year. So we had tons of people who were extremely talented. So that next year, I started out in the defensive backfield, and some people got hurt. I think Garrett Brown hurt a toe or whatever, had a hurt toe. I think Leroy Thompson had an injury. And so I was approached partway through the season, I think before the Boston College game, in reference to switching over and playing running back, because I had played running back in high school. And I figured, hey, what the heck? I've always done it all my life. I didn't have a problem with the switch. And it gave me an opportunity. I really didn't expect much out of myself, to be totally honest with you. We had a very good running back room at that time. And I'm kind of like Wally. I wasn't really expecting to play much. I think I got in for a couple of games, got into the Temple game. I think I scored. And then we wound up going to BC. I think I'm the third guy on the depth chart, not really expected to play at all. And all of a sudden, somebody, the running back goes down, and guess what? Like kind of like Wally said, Shelly, you're up. And it was weird how it happened. It didn't. I think people always ask me, "Oh, did it feel weird for you or strange or whatever?" And it really didn't. It felt really kind of natural for me, being in that game and playing running back, and again having a tremendous supporting cast. You know, Tony Saka, Terry Smith was that wide receiver. We had a tremendous offensive line, great fullbacks. You know, the blocking guys. And as that game went on, and moving into the second half, obviously everybody knows about the Boston College game and me breaking the freshman rushing record. But it was so many guys that were responsible for that happening and giving me that positive attitude and knowing that I could do this. So it kind of happened for me, and then that was the high point. I remember being interviewed after the game, and people were asking me, "Oh, what do you want to do?" And I remember telling people, "Oh, I still want to play defensive back," because really that was kind of what I love doing. And then the next week we go and play Alabama. We travel out to Alabama. I was pegged to start that game. It worked at starting the whole week prior to going out to Alabama. We go out, and I think I might have gotten one carry in that game. My mom had flown out and to come watch us play. And, kind of like Kyle says, you hit that point where, you're like, where am I right now? You're a little disappointed. And I can honestly say, I had some thoughts of leaving, and I think that's just a young player in you that you actually got a piece of that pie, a piece of that thing that you've been striving for, and you felt like it was taken away from you. But hindsight being 2020, looking back, that was a phenomenal Alabama team with a great defense. I think we wound up winning, shutting them out. I think we won that game 9-0 on 3 field goals. I think that was the final score of that game. But that was probably my low point. It was personally, because I think I took it personally when it wasn't that against as far as the coaches were concerned. I think they were looking out for me as a young player playing against a team like Alabama. I think they were looking out for me. And then the following year, I still wound up playing running back, had some success. And was kind of a part-time. I guess I was in one of the blue jerseys, like Kyle said, the jersey game of blue green, and I was in a blue jersey. I think it was me, Richie Anderson, and Gary, who were the three starters, considered 3 starters at the time. Well, Richie started most of the time. So I had more part-time duty, did some kickoff return and specialty team work. And then my junior, by the third year, I wound up switching back to defensive back. Initially started the spring out with playing Darren Perry's old position, which was the hero position or strong safety in Penn State's defense. And then wind up after the spring, the coaches came to me and said, "Hey, we'd like you to move to cornerback." And from that point on, I started at cornerback my last 2 years. Wound up being fairly successful, even though it was a position that was very unfamiliar to me. I kind of learned. It was kind of one of those jobs that you learn on the fly, and I kind of learned it on the fly, and wound up at the end of it making all second team All Big Ten my last year. But again, having those ups and downs, but also having that support network. Again, having guys like Wally, Lee Rubin, Reggie Givens, Troy Drayton, who was my roommate at the time. Having those guys around in that family atmosphere, we all had our ups and downs as far as school was concerned, as far as playing time was concerned, as far as disappointments. But we all supported each other through that, and that was kind of the Penn State way. We knew in order for us to survive there and to be successful, we all depended on each other and we all pushed each other. Even when we were down, we were at a high point, a low point, we all supported each other.
Thank you, Shelly. That's an important. One of the things that we were all taught was you're not feeling comfortable, right? And then so when you get those real life situations, whether it's on the football field or in the classroom, we were always geared survival. I don't want to use that word too much because it was a sport, but we were always given challenges. So when we got to these opportunities, we were accustomed to it, whether it was on the football field. I can remember practices being way more intense than an actual game. And I remember you guys would play the game. It would be so much enjoyable watching because you were having fun. Little fun time now. We're going to go post-college. So we hit the professional career. So if you want to, I know all three of you have been in the NFL a little bit, so you can go ahead and touch base on that. But then the journey after the NFL as well. Kind of tell us what you're doing now, and we'll go from there. Wally, you're up first.
Okay. I was fortunate enough to get drafted into the NFL, 7th round by the Ravens in the 97 draft, and played a couple of years with them. A lot of times what people don't realize is how challenging professional football is. It's very challenging because it's people's jobs on the line every day. In college, you have scholarships that are provided to players, but in the NFL, you have to earn it every day when you go out there. So that's a big difference, and nothing is guaranteed in the NFL. You have to compete for the job every day. But like I said, I was on the roster for a couple of years with the Ravens, got released, signed by the Falcons at the end of one season, played a couple of games with them, got released later on that season. And I played 1 year of XFL, the first iteration of that in 2001. That was a lot of fun, enjoyed that. And the one thing when I was in college, I said I wouldn't do was play arena football. I ended up playing 2 weeks of that before I started grad school in 2001. So that was the length of my professional football career. I came back here, went to grad school, earned my master's in higher education, and began working in the Morgan Academic Center for Student Athletes. Worked there for 4 years, left in 2007, went to the University of Georgia, worked there for 4 years in their academic support for student athletes. And I left there in 2011 to go to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, worked there for about a year and a half before transitioning to my current position as the director of the Football Lettermen's Club here at Penn State. And I just completed my 8th year. So that's what I'm up to these days. I get a chance to interact with a lot of my former teammates. Now I'm at the age where I've got teammates of mine who have kids going to college. So time has flown very fast, but it's always enjoyable getting a chance to see guys. Through my time being a player here at Penn State, working at the university, I've met a lot of different football players through the different generations, organized events for different groups that come on campus related to football. So it's been a very fulfilling position for me, and I look forward to continue doing that in the future.
That's great. Giving back to the speaking. There's nothing more powerful for me than working for the institution that I got my degree from. So I know it's Wally and I get to work with each other every day, and it's a blessing. So Shelly, you got quite the career after football. Touch a little bit about that.
Yeah, I spent, like Wally, I didn't spend a long time in the NFL. I got drafted in 1994 by the Vikings in round 5. I spent about 2.5 years with the Vikings. Most of that time was spent on the practice squad, but had an opportunity to. It was a tremendous experience for me. I was around a lot of great guys, several Hall of Famers. I think Warren Moon was on the team for a couple of years. Chris Carter. Oh my goodness, there's several other Hall of Famers that were on that team. But at that point, I think kind of like Wally was saying, there was the World League that was going on at that time. I had some offers to go and play overseas, and I had kind of made up in my mind, I loved football, but playing professionally, I would say probably wasn't necessarily my passion. It was something that happened for me, and obviously I gave it my all to be there. But I just felt like it was time for me to move on and do something else. So I left that and started working in corrections initially, and working with juveniles. So I was working as a probation officer. I spent time with the Wilder Foundation in Minneapolis. I actually moved back there for a while, got married, worked for the Wilder Foundation, and then wound up working for the county in juvenile probation for about 4 or 5 years. And then I was so passionate about working with the kids, I knew that I couldn't do this for the rest of my life. Like, there's no way, seeing the things that were happening, I was like, I got to go do something else and help kids in some other way outside of work. So I wound up applying for a federal job with federal probation, and wound up working with another former Penn State guy, Odell Wilson, who's actually works in federal probation in Minneapolis. We worked together for a while. I transferred to North Carolina, and in North Carolina, I decided, I want to do something else. So I wound up going to the FBI Academy, went through the FBI Academy, and for about the last almost 11, 12 years now, I've been working for the FBI.
And you're down in Florida now, right?
Yes, I'm working down in Florida. The Miami is our main office, but I'm living in West Palm Beach, living and working in West Palm Beach, Florida.
Good, making an impact, right? That's the mission, no matter what we've done. Kyle, we'll finish up with you before we hit our question and answer session. I think you're muted, buddy. Yeah, that's okay. We've all been there.
Unmute. There we go. Yeah, I didn't want to be making noise and having kids come in the room and interrupting everybody else. So anyway, yeah, similar to these guys, we're having a chance to play in the NFL. Really, the 1994 season that we had, which so many Penn State fans will remember, was such a springboard for so many of us. Obviously, when you're having that kind of success, the NFL takes notice and they kind of salivate over all the players on. We had such an explosive offense. They really it made us highly desirable. So I ended up being drafted by New York Jets in the first round. Wasn't expecting to go there at all. Thought I'd be drafted by the Cleveland Browns with the 10th pick. Bill Belichick was there at the time, and years later I ended up playing for him with the Patriots, and we kind of had a laugh that I finally got to join him as a head coach and a player. But like I said before about my experience at Penn State being hills and valleys, it was no different than the NFL. I was very fortunate and blessed to have played a good while, 13 years, longer than I ever imagined I would. But the early years were not that successful. My first 2 years in the NFL were, like I said, with the Jets. We won 4 games and we lost 28. And as a first-round pick that's expected to turn the franchise's fortune around and turn things around, get it going the right way. I was being labeled everything under the sun, a bust, not a good player, a bad decision by the organization. And it was difficult. It was kind of a bit of an identity crisis, because all of us as men can sometimes place a lot of our sense of ourselves and our what kind of men we are by our career success, and it really challenged me to rethink that, and grew deeper in my faith because of that experience. And I wouldn't change it now for the world. And it turns out, things got better, thankfully. The Jets hired Bill Parcells to be the coach. He came in, and it was the biggest one-year turnaround in NFL history. We went 1-15 in '96. '97, we went 9-7, then 12-4 the very next year. And it was such a welcome and refreshing change for me. I had a lot of injuries those first 2 years that hampered my ability to perform, which was one of the reasons I wasn't doing that well in the field, but I just was kind of playing through it. But it was such a morbid atmosphere, week after week, going in after losses and feeling such a depressed type feeling in the workplace. So I wasn't really enjoying the NFL experience my first couple of years, but Parcells came in. He had a very similar approach to Coach Paterno, very structured, very disciplined. It was his way or the highway. And I was so glad for it because that's what I was used to from high school and college, and got to go in the right direction. And really, it was a big turning point in my football career. I kind of it breathed life into me. I had a degree of success in 97. Then it turns out 98, which just so happened to be my free agent year, was my most successful season. Um, and then that, because I had such success and then became a free agent, I signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So my most productive years and the ones I most enjoyed on an individual level anyway were my first 4 years in Jacksonville, where I was being used as a true hybrid tight end, catching a decent amount of passes and being used as a blocker as well. And years 9 through 13, I turned into more of a blocking tight end, but any way to stay on the field and get some extra years, is kind of the approach at that point. And I was staying healthy, so which makes you enjoy it so much more. But I was 36 years old the last time I walked off a football field. It just so happened to be the 2008 Super Bowl. I was on a very special New England Patriots team. My last year, probably the best team to ever play in the NFL without winning a Super Bowl. We were undefeated, 18-0, but we lost to the New York Giants on a couple of miraculous plays. And I give them a ton of credit. They did a great job of shutting down an extremely high-powered offense. The only thing I could liken it to would be, that 94 Penn State offense, 2007 Patriots. We were breaking NFL records for yardage and points and first downs and everything else. I mean, third down percentage. It was just like a well-oiled machine, but the Giants ended up holding us to only 14 points in the Super Bowl. So all of us would have traded 4 regular season losses for a win at the end. It doesn't really matter what your regular season record is, but it was a heck of a way to go out. And it turns out I emerged from the NFL in 2008. And that was a heck of a time in our world's history. I guess the world was kind of going to a proverbial hell in a handbasket, financially speaking. It was the beginning of the Great Recession. So it was, I was pretty diligent about what the money that I'd made when I played in the NFL. So I didn't have to rush into anything. But when you're sitting there watching everything you put away depreciate by 40%, whether it was real estate or stocks and bonds, it gives you a sense of urgency to try to figure out what may be next, because the uncertainty that you're seeing all around you. So at the same time, there was high unemployment, people who had been employed for the previous 13 plus years, from that time that I was in the NFL, who were experienced. They were in the streets, some of them, and looking for work. So I thought, well, what would be a better thing for me to do right now than just sort of professionally recreate myself and figure out what it is I want to do with the second half of my life. And so I initially got into finance, got all my financial services licenses, the Series 7, 66, all insurance licenses, things of that nature. People in that industry would understand what they are. Even became a CFP, a certified financial planner. And I figured, well, since I'm in education mode and I don't know for sure whether finance is what I want to stay in, let me go ahead and I had the desire to get a law degree and add the legal knowledge to the financial knowledge. So I went ahead and did that. So it was basically 5 years of studying finance and law, and from 2008 to 2013. And in hindsight, I'm really glad I did it. It gave me a lot of more awareness and wherewithal to understand the business, the world of business, and understanding how things work. I've heard it said that one thing the law degree does for you is it helps you understand how the world works. And it really does in a lot of respects. And I'm glad I did it. It was tedious though at times, but at the same time, I'd sit there, be studying in the law library and getting ready to study for the bar exam. And I thought, well, you know what, if I made it through 18 training camps with guys like Joe Paterno, Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick, Tom Coughlin, and I had awesome coaches. But at the time, when you're playing for them, they're tough. And I thought if I made it through that, I applied the same attitude and sense of grit and determination that I had playing for those guys, well, I can make it through this, And so I'm glad I did. I passed the bar, and now I'm affiliated with a law firm down here in Northeast Florida that's out of St. Augustine called Ginn & Petro. They do real estate. We do real estate law, and we also do estate planning. And I actually run and manage a small finance company that deals with real estate related finance. Some small builders that I partner with here in the Northeast Florida area. It's been a very good time in real estate for quite some time, especially this last year. So many people are flooding this state from the Northeast and from out West, and leaving some of the more restrictive states as far as the regulatory environment, whether it was COVID or taxes and things like that, and going to states that are here in the South with good weather and a good tax environment. So I'm enjoying it. It's a good time to be doing it. You kind of ride the wave while you can. And, in the way Joe trained us and the way he taught us to think as far as the students first, had I not been had that foundation, I never would have gone on to do those things. I'll never forget when I was in law school going to see Penn State playing a bowl game down here. It might have been the Citrus Bowl. I can't even remember who they were playing now, but I went to a practice And I said to him, I said, Joe, do you ever think when I was at Penn State I'd go to law school one day? He said, Brady, I didn't even think you'd get out of Penn State. He was worried I'd even graduate because, like I said, I was a really undisciplined kid, coming out of high school as far as my grades were concerned. Didn't take it very seriously, but all that changes when you get older and you have a little more maturity. And that was a fun memory. Him saying that, isn't that so much like him too? The personality and just telling you like it is.
Yeah, you're not a true. You can always tell those of us that had the pleasure of working with or playing for Coach Paterno's. Everybody has their impression of him, no matter what year you came in or graduated, whether it was his first class in 1966 or in the class of 2011, and those kids after that were recruited by him. So as we wrap up here, we got a couple minutes. I thought one of the best questions submitted by over 30 people. They wanted to know, what was your greatest game moment when you played? So Shelly, we'll start with you. On the field game moment.
I mean, obviously, for me, my greatest game moment, I have two. I mean, obviously the Boston College moment, is something that, you always remember. It's kind of etched in time at Penn State. And then also, just that final season, the Big Ten season, and winning the big win against against Tennessee down in Orlando. Having that final, we struggled the year before. We started off great, and then we struggled the year before, and just trying to set a different tone. The seniors for the following year, we had made that pledge. We kind of had a little bit of a lull in the middle of that season, and then wind up finishing strong. We had that great game against Michigan State where we came back and won that game, and then jumped us in the polls, and then we went out and played a great Tennessee team that was ranked really high. I think Heath Schuler was the quarterback for that team, who was supposed to be like a top 10 pick as far as quarterbacks were concerned. We felt like we were kind of getting snubbed in the bowl game. Everybody was talking about Tennessee, and we knew how good of a football team we were. And I think finishing that season that way with a big win against Tennessee are probably, I mean, there's normal, a lot of great highlights, but those two are the ones that I remember as, obviously the Boston College game, and then finishing my career at Penn State with a great win against Tennessee.
That's great. I could real quick story on that game. I remember, for those of you that remember these games like we do, we were going in right before the halftime, and we had no timeouts left. And Fran Ganner was the offensive coordinator. And I remember Joe came over, and I happened to be running water and towels for the guys coming off. And Joe told Franny to run a draw play with Kajana. And we were on like the 16-yard line, I think. And Franny goes, Joe, we don't have any timeouts. He gets tackled in bounds. We're done. He's like, they're not even going to touch him. And so, of course, we ran the draw play, and Kyle, I think you made a steal block on the end, and Key went down the sideline and scored. And Franny, I tapped Franny on the backside. I said, "Great call, coach." And he goes, "Right." So that's the inside. Kyle, your favorite memory on the field at Penn State?
First of all, Kirk, I remember that play perfectly as well. I think it was a little bit of a rainy day down there in Citrus Bowl, and Shelly was right. They were totally underestimating us, but we were really building momentum with that team and getting better as the year went on. And I think it was true though. Kijana did not get touched on the way in, and we all just, after making our block, and once he gets away from everybody, no one's catching him at that time. So that was a lot of fun, and that second half of that season, but really that senior year, for me, that 94 season, which, for some of the guys like Wally, it wasn't, their last year yet, but it was such a special season. I could point to so many games going up to Michigan, and winning up there in the big house against a really good Michigan team with Tyrone Wheatley and Ty Law and Amani Toomer and so many really big time talented players on that team to go into that kind of environment and win. But then probably the game that, is going down in infamy, so to speak, with the 94 team, as far as showing the character that team had developed over the previous years, was the Illinois game, right? So down 21-0 at one time, then down 28-14 at halftime. And we were so sure of ourselves that we'd kind of figure out what they were doing to us offensively and defensively. The entire offense, and the coaching staff was just saying, "Hey, defense, you hold them, limit them to whatever, seven or less points this half, we're going to win this game. You know, we had figured out what they were doing to us that were so disruptive, and went out there, and I don't think they stopped us on a single drive in the second half, you know. And the famous Dana Howard, the middle linebacker, who was a great player at college level, you know, and all Big Ten and Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, I believe. And they had a stud defense. I mean, they had Simeon Rice and Kevin Hardy, guys I played with for over a decade in the NFL. Kevin Hardy was one of my teammates. He didn't even like talking about that game. And, you know, so we come back from that to win, what was it, 35-31, I believe. Yeah, so the defense only let up a field goal in the second half, and we score, you know, we had 14 points in the first half, ended up scoring, you know, got to 35 in the second half. And the defining moment, obviously, was that last drive where Kerry went 7 for 7, and it was just perfect, you know, with nailing I had a couple catches that drive. Bobby had some big time catches. Everybody was contributing. I mean, the run game, the pass game, it was clicking on all cylinders. And the thing you never forget about the camaraderie and the competition is going up to the line of scrimmage as we came off our own goal line almost, you know, what, the 4-yard line or 6-yard line, whatever it was. I believe it was the 4. We had to go 96 yards. It got to a point when we were around the 30 or 40-yard line of our own territory still, and we were going up to the line of scrimmage, and those were some warriors on that defense. Now we were going up to the line of scrimmage, and you could see it in their eyes. They knew they couldn't stop us. And that was a special feeling. It still kind of gives me chills to this day to think about it, you know, and we were talking about it in the huddle. We said, they can't stop us, and they know it. We just had too many weapons, and we were just clicking, and it wasn't going to be stopped. And it's just a matter of whether they were going to have enough time to score, you know, at the end of the game. But they knew, and we knew we were going to go in and score to get up to 35, make it 35-28 or no, 35-31 at that time. They didn't end up getting any points in their last drive. But so that was definitely a defining moment for that team, the game that sealed the Big Ten championship and our Rose Bowl bid. And just such a special game in so many ways. And the adversity we faced the night before and that day, that's also another part of the story.
Yeah, Kyle alludes to the adversity. We lost power in our hotel around midnight. So we ended up eating cold pizza in the hotel bar. And we as student managers everything was on the 23rd floor. And we had to carry, little guys like me had to carry these big trunks down the steps. And so we got quite a workout in. But yeah, it came full circle and we got it done. So Wally, we'll finish up with you. Your best on the field moment for you.
Well, it's related to my high school a little bit. When I was in high school, my junior and senior year, we won 23 games in a row and lost the state championship to Spartanburg High School. So one of our in-season opponents for this season, Auburn, had a tailback from that high school that beat my high school in the state championship game. And we had the fortunate occurrence to play them in the Outback Bowl down in Tampa at the end of my junior season. And we weren't getting a lot of credit. You know, we were 9-3 regular season, a little disappointed, but still got a chance to go down and play in a nice bowl game. But personally, it meant a little bit more to me to be able to have the chance to play Auburn and especially Steve Davis. So when we beat the brakes off of them in a torrential downpour, that was very satisfying for me because that kind of closed the book on that sour note to the end of my high school career.
Yeah, it's always special. Wally and I came into school together and left together. Now we're working side by side, and it's great to do that. The friendships that have transcended, and I've known Kyle and Shelly jumping in and out of bowl games, and when we used to play up at Minnesota and seeing them around, and of course we get them back on campus. It's a family reunion. So listen, we could go on for probably another 6-7 days, not only hours with stories. I want to thank on behalf of the Penn State Alumni Association. I want to thank them for allowing us to share a little bit of our journey with you as alums. And I want to take this time to thank Shelly and Kyle and Wally for just chiseling out a little hour of their day. I want to thank you as the alums for thinking enough of us to jump on here. So in true Penn State way, we'll finish up with our chair. And listen, we'll see everybody back on campus. We navigated through unprecedented times, as we've all heard, but we're going to get everybody back. And whether it's for a field hockey game or a football game with 110,000 of our family members, we'll look forward. And remember, Penn Staters are everywhere. So we are
Penn State.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for joining.